Shalom, shalom. Welcome once again to our Able Code channel. It's a pleasure to have you here. The image you can see behind me is the famous Arizal, Ari, synagogue of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria in Safed, in the Galilee, northern Israel. This is one of the most famous and visited synagogues in the world. A beauty. It also showcases 16th century architecture. Furthermore, this synagogue you see behind me welcomed the great sages of the time, such as Rabbi Yosef Karo, Chaim Vital, Moses Cordovero, among other greats whose revolutionary teachings undoubtedly marked a significant change in the history of Judaism and, why not, the spiritual world. For today's class, we will address a central theme in Hebrew spirituality, the merit of the righteous, or zechut tzadikim, as it is expressed in Hebrew. From the days of Abraham the patriarch and the prophet Moses to the mystical teachings of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, tradition teaches that the acts of the righteous are not limited to their own souls, but radiate protection and mercy upon the entire world. This is a Jewish concept and one of rabbinic tradition. We will see how the Bible presents examples of intercession, Abraham pleading for Sodom, Moses halting divine punishment, and how prophetic, rabbinic, and Kabbalistic literature delves into the tension between individual justice and collective grace. We will also analyze the spiritual meaning of Lag BaOmer, the day of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, when according to Kabbalah, the channels of mercy are opened and judgments are mitigated by the merit of the righteous. In short, we will explore an enduring mystery of Judaism, how one elevated soul can sustain many, and how merit does not replace teshuvah, not at all, but rather strengthens and illuminates it. And we will do all of this in the context of our free Mishna course, when today we study Berachot in its Chapter 4, Teaching 7. This is Abel Flores, grateful that you dedicate your time to the study of the sacred scriptures. And without anything else to add, let's begin. Now let's read the Mishnah we are studying today, which is located in the tractate of Berachot, Mishnah, Teaching 4.7, and reads as follows. Rabbi Elazar ben Azarya says, the Musaf prayer should not be recited except in ḥéver. And the sages say, in ḥéver and in places that do not have ḥéver. Rabbi Yehudah says in his name, everywhere there is ḥéver, the individual, the Yahid, is exempt from the Musaf prayer. Thus the Mishnah says, Rabbi Elazar ben Azarya states the Musaf prayer only with ḥéver. The sages say with ḥéver and also without ḥéver. Rabbi Yehudah cites in his name, where there is ḥéver, the individual, Yahid, is completely exempt from Musaf. To understand all of this, we must contextualize that we are talking about prayer, and the prayer par excellence they are talking about here is the Amidah, which at that time the Tanaim called Shemona Esrei, which means 18 because it is a prayer originally made up of 18 blessings, whereas today there are 19. So, with the context clarified as always, let's explain the key terminology here. Tefilat Musaf, the additional, Amidah is performed exclusively on holidays such as Shabbat, Yom Tov, and Rosh Chodesh, and also on major holidays such as Passover, Shavuot, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Additional korbanot were performed on all holidays, so additional prayers are performed in the Amidah on all holidays. The Musaf today, where there is no temple, is a prayer instituted in parallel to the additional temple sacrifices on all Torah holidays. For example, on Purim and Hanukkah, which are not Torah holidays, but rather derabanan, there is no Musaf on those holidays, nor on Lag BaOmer or any of the holidays created by the judges and rabbis. Musaf is only performed on Torah holidays. Also, remember, as we already studied in this free Mishnah course, that when there is no temple, prayer, or tefillah does not replace the korbanot sacrifices, but rather complements them. It does not replace them because they are really two separate commandments. Even if the temple were still standing and functioning, the Amidah would have to be prayed as a commandment. But since there is no temple, the prayers are considered korbanot. So always remember, prayers do not replace the korbanot, but rather complement them. And the other term to clarify here is ḥéver, literally company of the people or city. The commentators understand it as a congregation, that is, a quorum. The Bartanura explicitly explains that it means tzibur, in public, not by individual. And this is basically the minyan. It's just that at that time, the Tanaim called it differently. They called it ḥéver, which can also be translated as friend of the city. That is, the congregation, the community. Not praying the Musaf alone, because these are days of the people's holiday, and it's not good to be alone, but rather to pray in community, as a community. Chapter 4 of Berachot addresses the frameworks and modalities of the Amidah, Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit, and adds the rule of Musaf. This Mishnah establishes who should say Musaf, only collectively or also individually. This is the basic discussion, whether Musaf can be prayed alone or exclusively with a minyan. But remember, Musaf is only prayed on holidays. So why would a person, a Jew, pray Musaf alone on a holiday without congregating? The Gemara in Berachot develops these positions, repeats Rabbi Yehudah's formulation in his name, and debates whether the Yahid, or a person alone or without a minyan, prays Musaf when there is a ḥéver. The crux of the matter is, Musaf, due to its communal origin, it corresponds to the communal sacrifice of the holidays of the Torah of Moses. Is it then restricted to the tzibur, the community, or does it also oblige each individual to do so individually? The normative codification decides in favor of an individual obligation. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 286-2 says, every individual is obligated to pray Musaf, whether there is a congregation in the city or not. This reflects the reading of the Gemara. Although some Tanaim linked Musaf to the communal framework, the halacha remains that the individual prays Musaf equally. The Jewish Encyclopedia summarizes this evolution, from an early communal vision to an individual obligation established by later sages and accepted by the codes. As you see here, once again, what was done in the 1st and 2nd centuries, in the time of the Mishnah and the Tanaim, no longer applies to our days, since the 16th century, when the great sages of the time, from Safed, transformed Judaism into a normative religion after so many centuries, and they cannot be judged because the world is changing, and the 16th century was not easy, much less so with the discovery of the new continent in that generation. Here are some practical details, zmanim, and order. The timing. The preferred time for Musaf is after Shacharit, and it should not be delayed beyond the 7th hour of the day. If it was said later, it has been fulfilled, but it is considered negligence, according to Orach Chaim 286-1. Liturgical order. It is customary to insert the Torah reading between Shacharit and Musaf. If there is great need, Musaf may be said and then the Torah reading. You should remember that on all Torah holidays, when Musaf is prayed in memory of the temple sacrifices, the Torah scroll is also brought out to be read on all Torah holidays, although in this case, the Torah is also read on many rabbinic holidays. One conceptual reading of this Mishnah is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azarya, who incidentally was the youngest rabbi of that generation to serve as president of the Sanhedrin while Rabban Gamliel was temporarily out of office, emphasizes the korban communal nature of Musaf. Since the Musaf sacrifice was communal, the prayer that replaces it should require tzibur, ḥéver, that is, a minyan. Chachamim then broadened the framework. Musaf is said whether or not there is a ḥéver, that is, it is not restricted to a quorum of 10 adult males praying at the same time in the same place. But Rabbi Yehudah clarifies in his name, when there is a ḥéver, the individual is exempt, because the communal element is already covered by the tzibur. The final halakha, however, does not follow this full exemption. Even if there is a kivir, the individual prays his or her own musaf. But this is, as we have already stated, in our time, or at least since the 16th century. So, remember, normative compendia, for example the Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim and other contemporary works, articulate the current practical framework. Musaf is a complete Amidah with its thematic blessing of the day, and is also prayed individually, without the need to be in a minyan. The current halakha is that each individual is obligated to recite Musaf, whether or not there is a ḥéver. A quorum is necessary for the repetition of the sheliach tzibur and for other communal elements, but not for an individual to perform his or her own Musaf Amidah. However, it should be noted that the Mishnah preserves the tension between the communal origin of Musaf in the temple and the personal responsibility for prayer. Normative practice adopted the latter without losing the value of the congregational framework. Now I want to explore the Musaf, its biblical origin, its liturgical evolution, and the specific characteristics of each Musaf in the Jewish calendar, which in Hebrew is called kaluach. This will help define the Musaf, both in its original, sacrificial form, and in its current parallel within the Siddur, or prayer book. Musaf literally means additional or supplementary. In the context of Jewish worship, which in Hebrew is called avodah, it designates the additional offering, korban musaf, that was required to be offered in the temple on Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and all holy days, Yamim Tovim, according to the Torah. After the destruction of the temple in 70 CE by the Romans, the sages of Yavne established that the remembrance and observance of these sacrifices would be maintained through an additional prayer, also called Tefilat Musaf, incorporated into the Siddur along with the 3 daily Amidot, Shacharit, Mincha, and Arvit. The Musaf, as I have already mentioned, has its explicit foundation in the Torah, particularly in Bamidbar/Numbers chapters 28 and 29, which detail the series of daily Tamidim and additional Musafim sacrifices. On Shabbat, according to Numbers 28:9-10, 2 additional lambs were offered in addition to the daily sacrifice, i.e. the korban tamid, which was a sacrifice in the morning and another in the afternoon. As you can see, on Shabbat, the Kohanim priests had more work than on any other day of the week, because in the temple, melachot, i.e. Shabbat work, were not prohibited. Only the 39 melachot were prohibited outside the temple, as Shabbat is observed to this day. On Rosh Chodesh, according to Numbers 28:11-15, 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs, and a sin offering were offered. Rosh Chodesh is the beginning of each lunar month, because the months in the Hebrew calendar are lunar. On Pesach, or Passover, according to Numbers 28:19-25, the daily offerings were sacrificed for all 7 days, in addition to the Tamid. On Shavuot, known as the Feast of the Reception of the Torah, and in Christianity this feast is known as Pentecost, according to Numbers 28:26-31, a number of sacrifices were sacrificed, similar to Pesach, with the specification of a new offering, which was the first fruits of the barley, after the counting of the Omer of the 50 days. As you can see, Pesach and Shavuot have a direct relationship. On Rosh Hashanah, which in the Torah is known as Yom Teruah, according to Numbers 29 verses 1-6, 2 bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs were sacrificed, in addition to the reminder of the shofar blast. On Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, according to Numbers 29:7-11, the same number of animals were offered as on Rosh Hashanah, plus the specific atoning service of Leviticus 16. As you can see, this festival is directly related to Yom Teruah, during those 10 days called the Days of Affliction and Judgment. On Sukkot, according to Numbers 29:12-34, there is a decreasing number of bulls, 13 on the first day, down to 7 on the 7th, plus rams and lambs. This is the festival with the greatest number of sacrifices of all the Torah festivals. And on Shemini Atzeret, the last festival of the Torah's festive calendar, according to Numbers 29:35-38, a single bull, a ram, 7 lambs, and a sin offering were sacrificed. In short, each day designated by the Torah with a Musaf sacrifice has its liturgical parallel in an additional Amidah during the morning prayer on each of those holidays. This is why the prayers on Jewish holidays are longer than on normal days, due to the Musaf. As we have already explained, the Talmud Berachot 26b teaches prayers were instituted in place of the daily sacrifices, korbanot. This means in complement. Therefore, the Musaf corresponds to the korban Musaf. It is recited once a day on that holiday after Shacharit, and it is not recited by those who are not obligated to make sacrifices. For example, women, according to many opinions, although some communities include them. The Gemara concludes that every individual is obligated to perform Musaf, but the public repetition, the Azarya of sheliach tzibur, represents the communal prayer that evokes the sacrifice of the entire people. The underlying idea, Musaf, is not a personal supplication, but a collective act of sacrificial remembrance. This is why it was originally intended to be linked to the quorum. On Shabbat at the temple, 2 yearling lambs without blemish, Numbers 28:9-10, plus grain offerings and libations. Symbolism, rest, perfection of the weekly cycle, completion. In the Siddur, Musaf Amida, with 7 blessings, as with every festive Amida. Central theme, Litzei Menukatenu, accept our rest, includes the phrase, this Shabbat day, because it is holy, you commanded to offer an additional sacrifice. On Rosh Chodesh at the temple, 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs, plus 1 goat for atonement, Numbers 28:11-15. In the Siddur, the Musaf includes the text, Rosh Chodesh Zeh, and mention of the monthly offering. It asks to renew the moon for us and for all Israel. Ya'aleh ve'yavo is added. On Pesach at the temple, Musaf offerings for 7 days, Numbers 28:19-25. Identical each day. In the Siddur, Musaf is prayed with reference to the freedom offering. without confession, vidui, with full hallel. On Shavuot at the temple, 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs, Numbers 28, 26 to 31, plus the 2 loaves of new bread, shtei halechem. In the Siddur, Musaf with the theme of the giving of the Torah, Yom HaBikurim Hazeh is included. Theme, renewal of the covenant, thanksgiving for the harvest and the Torah. On Rosh Hashanah at the temple, 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs, plus the daily sacrifice, Numbers 29:2. In the Siddur, a longest Musaf of the year is performed. It is divided into 3 sections called Malhuyot, reigns of God, Zichronot, memories, and Shofarot, blowings of the shofar. Each section contains 10 biblical verses. The theme is the divine coronation and universal judgment. On Yom Kippur in the temple, the same Musaf was performed as Rosh Hashanah, plus the atonement sacrifices described in Leviticus 16. In the Siddur, the Musaf reproduces in detail the service of the high priest, Abadat Kohen Gadol, with descriptions of the incense, the sprinkling of blood, and the confession for Israel. The phrase, Ashamnu Bagadnu, is included. The theme is expurgation, purity, return to origin, or teshuvah. On Sukkot, 7 days in the temple, decreasing number of bulls, 13, 12, 11, up to 7, plus rams and lambs, according to Numbers 29, 12, 34. Symbolism, universality of the nations, 70 bulls, 70 peoples. In the Siddur, Musaf for each day has its own mention, Musafei Sukkot. It is prayed with Hallel and Hoshanot. Theme, joy, harvest, and universality. And on Shemini Atzeret, Simchat Torah in the temple, 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs, Numbers 29, 35 to 38. In the Siddur, Musaf at the close of the festive cycle. In the diaspora, it is combined with Simchat Torah. Theme, withholding of the blessing and prayer for rain, Tefilat Geshem. Theme, conclusion of the agricultural and spiritual cycle. The daily Musaf Amida consists of 7 blessings. The first is Avot, patriarchs. The second is Gevurot, divine power. The third is Kedushat Hashem, holiness of God. The fourth is Kedushat Hayom, holiness of the day, varies by occasion. The fifth is Avodah, temple service. The sixth is Hoda'ah, thanksgiving. And the 7th and final is Shalom, peace. The 4th blessing is the one that changes and contains the core of the Musaf, the mention of the additional sacrifice prescribed for that day. Thus, the Musaf is a memorial and representational prayer. It does not ask for immediate human needs, but rather recreates in language the sacrificial liturgy of the temple. Its function is to maintain an awareness of cyclical sanctity, sacred time. It connects the individual with the historical community of Israel, and it reminds us that even though the temple is no longer there, the heart of the people continues to offer service. Now we will study the etymology of the term ḥéver, which comes from the root havar, meaning to unite, associate, and bind. ḥéver means companion, friend, member of a group, and ir means city, organized community. Therefore, ḥéver literally means city assembly, urban congregation, or local community. In the Mishnah, this term appears only here, in Berachot 4.7, and is functionally equivalent to tzibur, public congregation, kahal, assembly, or convened people, from which comes the term kehilah, or congregation. This term also means minyan, the minimum number of 10 adult males required for communal prayer. Tosafot Yom Tov emphasizes that the term does not only designate a physical presence, but also the spiritual entity that emerges when the people gather for divine service. The minyan, quorum of 10, is actually a term that originates in the Talmud and is based on several passages in the Tanakh. Leviticus 22:32, I will be sanctified, v'nikdashti, in the midst of the children of Israel. Gemara Megillah 23b, in the midst, the tok, implies a group. Compare this to Numbers 14:27, where God says, how long will this evil assembly continue? That Ada was the 10 spies, excluding Joshua and Caleb. Thus, by analogy of expressions or gezerah shava, all public sanctifications, such as Kaddish, Kedusha, or communal Musaf, require 10 people. The minyan constitutes Israel's collective presence before God. The Midrash teaches, when 10 pray together, the Shekinah, divine presence, is with them. Berachot 6a. Therefore, ḥéver implies more than a number. It is the minimal manifestation of a people, where the divine presence becomes tangible. A basic text is Abraham and the 10 righteous. The theological root of the minyan in Genesis 18:23-33. Abraham intercedes for Sodom. Will you destroy the righteous with the wicked? Perhaps there are 50 righteous, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. God responds, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. Genesis 18:32. In Rashi's classic exegesis, 10 represents the collective minimum required for a city to retain merit. Ramban, Nachmanides, below 10, there is no community, tzibur, only individuals. Midrash Bereshit Rabbah 49:13. From this we learn that 10 righteous men sustain a city. In connection with the Mishnah, the principle of Abraham becomes a paradigm. A city without ḥéver, without 10 righteous men, lacks a spiritual body and cannot sustain its relationship with the Creator. Therefore, Rabbi Elazar ben Azarya says that Musaf is only recited with ḥéver. It is not an individual prayer, but a sacrificial remembrance of the entire people. Without that minimum of 10, the communal dimension that represents collective Israel does not exist. From Abraham to the present, the number 10 symbolizes the boundary between the individual and the collective, between the human and the divine, between private supervision, hashgacha pratit, and public supervision, or hashgacha klali. The ḥéver is not mere arithmetic. It is a moral and spiritual unity, capable of attracting the Shekhinah, sustaining the Musaf prayer, and, in prophetic language, preventing the destruction of Sodom or any society that still retains 10 righteous people. Now, you need to understand something we haven't explained yet, but it's the real context of all this. It's the spiritual difficulty of making Tefilah prayer reach, and why the minyan and communal prayer help overcome these blockages. Because unlike the Shema, which is a separate commandment from prayer and is exclusive, the Shema Yisrael is like a direct call to the Creator, to God, twice a day, once in the morning and once at night, without interruption. But that's because the Shema is special. It's a unique mitzvah. But praying is something else entirely. Some confuse this, but it's because they don't know the Torah. In the Bible, there are images of closed heavens and unheard prayer, heavens of bronze. In the reproaches for sin, the Torah paints the sky as a metal that lets neither rain nor blessing pass through. The heavens above your head will be bronze, and the earth beneath you will be iron. Deuteronomy 28:23. This metaphor expresses spiritual closure/stagnation due to persistent transgression, a cloud that blocks prayer. You have covered yourself with a cloud, so that prayer cannot pass through. Lamentations 3:44. Tradition interprets it as a concealment of the divine face in the face of collective sin that interrupts listening. Your iniquities have separated you from your God, so that he will not hear. Isaiah 59:2. Lack of merit and Torah. Whoever turns away their ear from hearing the Torah, their prayer is an abomination. Proverbs 28:9. Inner impurity. If I had regarded iniquity in my heart, the Lord would not hear me. Psalm 66:18. So as we see here, Scripture directly links sin, divine concealment, and an obstacle to communication. Images of metal, cloud, and separation to describe the non-reception of prayer. Tefilah can be hampered by the lack of kavanah, by the weight of sin, and by the historical condition itself, hiding behind the temple. Minyan and genuine weeping open doors that are sometimes closed to the individual. Mun, dil. There are external forces that attempt to block it. The Zohar describes the flow, the spiritual sound, as it passes through the firmaments, and external forces attempt to slow its ascent until it reaches the summit. Kelapat, the Sitra Akra. The book Tanya teaches that extraneous thoughts, arrogance, dejection, or unclean desires are manifestations of Kelapat that dull the heart and prevent prayer from being a genuine service of the heart. The task is to break through that shell so that prayer may ascend. There are spiritual resistances, Kelapat and Machitzot, that intercept prayers without kavanah or merit. Correction, teshuvah, concentration, humility, allows prayer to pierce the veils. But why does the minyan mitigate these blockages? The Shekinah is presented with 10. Where there is a minyan, the presence resides, and prayer emerges already wrapped in communal sanctity. Berachot 6a. The time when the congregation prays is considered et ratzon. Tefilah enters through a door of favor that is not always open to the individual. Berachot 8a. Substitute for communal service. Prayers such as Musaf and public elements, Kaddish, Kedusha, Beraku, represent the people. Collective merit elevates even undeserving prayers. General halakhic framework and Mishnah Berakhot 4:7, already studied. Overcoming mechitzat. Although there is a historical iron wall, the sages teach ways of communal access, tzibur, tears, teshuvah. Berachot 32b, Baba Metzia 59a. Now we must learn a concept called zehut tzadikim. In simple terms, it is the spiritual efficacy of the merit of the righteous in bringing protection, salvation, or blessing to others, to the generation, or to the world. It is a particular expression of two broader notions: zehut avot, merit of the patriarchs, the kindness that God bestows on their descendants through those who love him, Exodus 26, and the representative power of the tzibur, community. When the community acts righteously, mercy is awakened and mitigates judgments, Zohar. Moses' intercession for Israel after the calf, and the Lord turned away from the evil that he had spoken, Exodus 32:14, a classic example of how a righteous person can suspend rigor. The Zohar interprets it as a softening of judgments, but this concept has limits, as in Ezekiel 14:14. Even if Noah, Daniel, and Job were within, they would deliver only themselves by their righteousness. It emphasizes that there are situations in which the merit of others does not rescue others. It emphasizes personal responsibility. The Ramkal, Derek Hashem, says, a tzaddik can benefit and even atone for his generation through his suffering and service, mitigating punishments and bringing spiritual benefits to others. The Zohar, when people improve their actions, judgments are mitigated and mercy dominates over the kelipat, shell's impurities. The merit of the righteous is a channel for this reversal. However, the ruling does not depend on the merit of others, but on teshuvah, repentance. Yom Kippur, for example, entails suffering, and in extreme cases, death. These are the four categories of atonement. Yoma 85b, Rambam Hilkot Teshuvah 134. No custom or segula replaces this framework in traditional Judaism. But the merit of the righteous also exists, but it is not normative. In fact, there is a tradition of the Lamed Vav, 36 hidden righteous, an agadic idea according to which the world is sustained by the merit of the hidden righteous, not halakha, but a moral mystical teaching. The Zohar and Idrazuta present the day of Rashbi or Shimon Bar Yochai as Hilula, nuptial joy, and a day of grace, where secrets are revealed and judgments are softened, mitukat hadinim. The Arizal, through Rav Chaim Vital, Pri Etz Chaim Shar Sefirat HaOmer, establishes the unique joy of Lag BaOmer and customs such as lighting bonfires in honor of Rashbi, because in his Hilula, judgments are mitigated and channels of mercy are opened through the merit of the tzaddik bringing yeshuot, help or salvation. The tzaddikim act as channels that mitigate judgments and open mercy. Lag BaOmer is a peak of that dynamic. This concludes today's class. Until the next video.